Imagine living in a town that's on fire, not for a day or a week, but for over 60 years. Yep, that's a real place. Today we're going deep on the strange, tragic story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that's been burning from below since 1962.
You know, when you live in a place that surreal, you develop a pretty dark sense of humor. A former resident famously quipped, "It's the only place you can be buried and cremated at the same time." And honestly, that one-liner just perfectly captures the bizarre reality of this place.
And this gives you a pretty chilling idea of why they joked like that. What you're looking at, that's not fog. That's steam and toxic gas, like carbon monoxide, just seeping out of the ground. The Earth itself is hot, it's unstable, and some have called it, pretty bluntly, hell on Earth.
So that's the big question, right? How in the world did a small, quiet town in coal country manage to catch fire and then just never go out?
All right, let's get into it. To figure this out, we have to rewind the clock all the way back to what seemed like a totally normal day in the spring of '62.
So before all this, Centralia was just a town. A pretty typical, tight-knit mining community. You know, its best days were probably in the past, but it was still home to more than 1,400 people. A place where everybody knew everybody, built right on top of this massive deposit of some of the best anthracite coal in the world.
And here's where it all goes wrong, starting with something so mundane. On May 27th, just before Memorial Day, the town hired some volunteer firefighters to clean up the local landfill. Standard procedure back then? You just set the trash on fire. But then, a couple of days later, the flames were back, so they put them out again. By June 4th, it was roaring back to life, so bad they needed a bulldozer. And that's when they found it, on June 10th, a 15-foot-wide hole, totally unsealed and hidden by trash, that dropped straight down into the maze of abandoned coal mines under the town.
The wild thing is, to this day, no one knows for sure exactly how it started. The most popular theory is that the cleanup fire just got out of control and lit up a vein of coal. But there are other ideas too. Maybe a trash hauler dumped some still hot ash from a coal burner. Or maybe another mine fire that was already burning nearby just spread. It could have even been spontaneous combustion. We'll probably never know for sure what the initial spark was.
So, a spark in a landfill. That seems manageable, right? How does that become an underground inferno that you can't put out? Well, the answer is buried in the very ground Centralia was built on.
Okay, so you gotta understand this key term, pillar robbing. Back during the Great Depression, people were desperate. Unemployed miners would sneak back into these abandoned tunnels, and they'd chip away at the giant coal pillars that were left behind to hold up the ceilings. This turned the underground into this chaotic, unstable labyrinth. But more importantly, it created the perfect storm for a fire, a huge network of fuel, the coal, and a never-ending supply of oxygen from all those new passages.
And what happened next was just this decades-long, totally futile fight to stop it. I mean, they tried everything. At first, they just tried pouring water on it. When that didn't work, they dug these huge trenches to try and cut the fire off. They even tried flushing the mines with a mix of water, slurry, and ash to choke it out. Every single attempt failed. They either ran out of money or they completely underestimated how massive the fire really was. In some cases, their digging actually made things worse by giving the fire more oxygen.
By 1983, the fire had gotten so big that the U.S. government finally did the math. The final estimate to dig the whole thing up and put it out for good? A staggering $663 million.
Now, compare that number to this one. Faced with that insane bill, Congress made a pretty cold calculation. Instead of trying to put out the fire, they set aside $42 million for a much simpler, and let's be honest, much more heartbreaking solution. Just buy out every single property and move the entire town.
But that decision, it didn't just happen overnight. For nearly 20 years, while all the officials were debating and failing to stop the fire, the people of Centralia, they just tried to live a normal life right on top of it all.
I mean, can you even imagine? Roads would crack open from the heat, venting steam and fumes. People had to put carbon monoxide detectors in their basements because this deadly, odorless gas was seeping into their houses. The ground in your own backyard could be hot enough to burn you. It was a true slow-motion disaster.
For a long time, the rest of the world just kind of ignored Centralia. It was their problem. But that all changed on Valentine's Day 1981. A 12-year-old kid named Todd Domboski was playing in his backyard when the ground just opened up. A steaming 150-foot-deep sinkhole swallowed him. He was seconds from being lost when his cousin managed to pull him out.
That terrifying moment finally got the national media's attention. Suddenly, nobody could ignore Centralia anymore. And this photo, man, it just says it all. The people there were scared, they were angry, and they felt totally abandoned. This sign reads, U.S. Department of Interior plays Nero while mine fire burns. It just captures that desperate fight for someone, anyone, to do something before their whole world was gone. So yeah, the incident with the Domboski kid, it forced the government to act. But the solution they came up with? It gave the residents of Centralia a truly impossible choice.
What came next was the slow, bureaucratic death of a town. In 1983, the residents voted to take the buyout and move. Then, in 92, the state started forcing the issue, using eminent domain to condemn any homes left. In 2002, the post office revoked the town's zip code. Poof! It was gone from their system. By 2009, the handful of people still hanging on were getting formal eviction notices. A town was literally being wiped off the map.
And this chart just lays out the stark reality of that choice. From over 1,400 people when the fire started, down to about 1,100 by the time the buyout was offered. And today, fewer than 10 people are left, basically living as squatters in the homes they've lived in their whole lives. So, what's left? What has Centralia become? And what is the legacy of this fire that is still burning deep under the Pennsylvania soil? This map from 1983 is just fascinating because it shows you the invisible enemy they were dealing with. Look at these hot spots. You can see how much of the town was already being consumed from below. A threat literally eating the ground out from under their feet. And this is the Centralia you'd find today. It's an eerie grid of empty streets where houses used to be. It's become this weird tourist spot for people who are into that kind of thing. But really, it's a powerful, smoking symbol of what can happen when we mess with the environment and then fail to deal with the consequences. Experts figure there's enough coal down there to keep this fire burning for another 250 years. It leaves us with this really haunting question. What is the final lesson from a disaster that was so huge, so expensive, and so slow-moving that in the end we decided it was just easier to walk away?